The dreadful waiting had finally taken its ceaseless toll upon even my own mechanical heart. True, time was a thing I had in ample supply. True, further, that it was the one thing I had lacked before the procedure. But if there is one thing that gears and coils and springs could not account for, it was the melancholy of the human soul, which creeps upon one like a burglar in the wee hours of night. It was to this end, many decades since my resurrection into a thing beyond mere limited flesh, that I began to surrender in totality the grave sin my parents had cautioned me most against. Wanderlust. Still, they had long since been laid to their great rest, and had not lived to see the advancements in artificial flesh that had been developed since the great war that was to end all wars. The rending claws of human self-destruction had unwittingly given me my own means of emancipation from my slowly decaying mansion. Funny, it strikes, how the only incorruptible thing within the confines of my walls and gardens and drawing rooms and parlors was myself. 18 decades was quite a while to spend in a single location, and, for anything lesser than myself, would surely drive one to an all-consuming madness. An illness of the mind, they say, to parallel that of the body. Still, by the grace of whatever providence guides the shape of mortal affairs, I had been, since a drastic surgery and reconstruction in my youth, rendered immune to disease and disorders which plague all things that still draw breath. During the great cholera outbreak, some time ago, I might have strode unafraid amongst men like some angel, untouched by the miasma which affected them were it not for my visage. Beautiful and hideous I was, even to myself. Beautiful, yes, so beautiful. A work of craftsmanship that not even God Almighty could duplicate. Gears exposed for easy maintenance and to display the minute precision with which every motion was taken. Springs like that of a grand Swiss clock providing me with animus, a face, and chest not unlike that of a porcelain doll that could demonstrate to a child the wide range of emotive intensity with which, as an adult, it would be forced to contend. Beautiful for my having become, through an arduous process, a singular being, something far, far greater than my prior lowly state. Yet, in spite of that, I was hideous too for my obvious inhumanity. The look on the faces of my dearly beloved parents when the surgeon had lifted the cloth from me and announced that I had been spared my wasting illness which, for the majority of my life, had been consuming me bodily and leaving me a frail thing, not unlike a bird with a broken wing, was a mixture of sweet, heavenly relief soured by a deep soul dread. Mother had fainted, if I recall correctly, which of course I do. My recollection is like my chassis, perfect and inviolable. Father, stoic that he was, shook the hand of the doctor and quietly saw him to a hansom cab waiting by the side entrance. Such a reaction upon being cured of an incurable disease would ordinarily, for one not as myself, affect their self-perception. So too would the years that followed. I was to remain confined to the grounds like an invalid, no, like a common criminal, as if by survival I had committed a grave misdeed. Father insisted upon it. People would not understand with what price my survival was bought. Wondering would expose the hatred of the world. Father spoke of fear being turned into hatred, which in turn became violence. I entreated with him, but as a fist to skin of iron, he insisted nonetheless. If one did not know better, they would have assumed that my parents felt shame at me. Mother averted her gaze as I walked the halls. Patrols of the grounds always seemed to hover close, but not enough for warmth or affection, no. More like she was observing me, watching to see if a hidden sin would become revealed and justify my confinement. Father, the warden that he was fast becoming, would oft change the subject when I discussed the possibility of heading into the town at the bottom of the hill. Neither seemed fit to treat me properly as the miracle I was. I know the truth. They could not help but be astounded by me, by my ascension. My brothers, once a common and welcome sight, spent more time with their households. Only around holidays could they be found around our home, and soon even that occurrence became rare. None besides my sister, beautiful and sweet as she was, still cared for me as a sibling ought. Ah, Annabelle, how I adore you, your delicate tresses resting like the clouds of heaven upon your shoulders, your voice trilling a melody more divine than that of the harp of Aeolus, your cheeks so much like my own, smooth and pale as fine china. Even then, during your great absence, I felt your presence keenly. It was as if I could reach out a hand and brush my copper fingers along the delicate lace of your dress. Ah, 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 such misery, such longing, such a soul-crushing solitude I found when you abandoned me to the incarceration that had been forced upon my own newly able body. In my convalescence in my prison, my Annabelle was a seraphim. In her I found the warmth needed to carry me, whilst I burned in turmoil at the envies our parents felt towards me, and chafed at the avoidance of our brothers. Annabelle soothed me. She was to me more luminous than the sun, more precious than gold, more delicate than a field of daisies. The rest of the world could decay. So long as I had her, all would be well. Ah, what a misfortune! It was shortly after our parents died, together in their rest as was their long-stated wish, that I lost her as well. My brothers, one by one, refused the administration of the estate, and thus it fell upon me. Alas! The household staff, without the stern hand of my mother guiding, began to make their displeasure over my perfection known. One by one they dwindled. Oh, Annabelle, the names they called me, the deep gouges they tried to carve out in the only parts of me that yet remained tender. Did you know, sweet, that the butler, Jonathan Trellick, had blamed me for the death of mother and father? Me! But I tried to assure him that this was not the case, that such things were impossible. The police inspector himself had even noted that, despite how it may appear, accidents happen frequently. Things fall off walls all the time. Everything decays. Except me. Except my love for you. except the spark we share beating inside our paired hearts. Despite my efforts at correction, however, this rumor grew among the staff until eventually only Annabelle and I remained at home. Ah, how I doted on her, how she was showered with all the affection I could muster, in a great manner, alone but for the two of us. With a body that never tired, did I demonstrate the depths of my love. Ah, her soft, plaintive cries to the heavens as we embraced. Oh, the reckless abandon with that most forbidden of desires was explored. Over time, an idea that at first seemed so scandalous and unthinkable had become so natural to us as to no longer be met with resistance. We satisfied each other, her, my soul and I, our flesh. Thus it carried on for several years until that fateful day. She had need to head into town again for provisions, as was her habit. She still required food and drink. This I allowed her, it being necessary for the preservation of her mortal form. What a figure she struck in her linen coat! Its long sleeves and high collar obscured the markers of my love, a secret known only to us and sealed in flesh. She told me she would be back soon, that she would be only a day's trip for provisions, and then she would return to my arms. She promised. And like the meadowlark, she glanced at me, sang a farewell, and vanished from my doorway. After several days passed, I grew worried. Correspondences were sent out to siblings, to family friends, to authorities, all returned blank. None had seen her. I had endeavored to venture out on my own once or twice, but my recollection twisted upon the words of my father and how the groundskeepers once brandished a revolver at me the very day he was dismissed from service. The terror in his eyes as I approached him, like that of a rabbit caught in a bite of string left along his path. It was a terror that, like a contagion, spread and afflicted myself. That grand irony of the walls and bars of prisons is that it keeps the long-suffering inmates as safe as they are cloistered. Safety, resentment, security, and isolation would walk hand in hand in the darkling recesses of my mind for many revolutions of the sun. My prison, my home, my protector, my destroyer. I therefore resolved to trust. My sister loved me as I loved her. There was good reason for her delay. Of this I grew assured. She was devoted and steadfast and honest. So I waited. Years dragged themselves along heavily, and still I dwelt within the walls of the estate. The books in the library which I read and reread began to fall into dust. The boards creaked and groaned with age. The portraits yellowed and grew hazy. The world decayed around me. Still, I remained regardless, waited. Excuses were made and discarded with time. She had stayed over an evening with a friend. She had been waylaid by weather. She had answered a summons. She was kidnapped, abducted, press-ganged into a grand adventure like a hero from a Stevenson story. She had fallen ill herself. She was borne aloft by some miserable sprite in the deep woods and been borne into the future. She was held in a deep fairy slumber and awaited me at far green Avalon. She was sealed away like the hope of Pandora, awaiting the second opening of the box after a flurry of miseries. She would return if she had, but the power to put some potent force waylaid her, and it would be necessary to venture out to rescue her. It was here that my wanderlust had taken me. My yearning for her finally outstripped my prior commands to wait at home. I struck out at night at first. The need to remain unseen still pressed heavily upon my quavering heart. During the long trailing years, word was spread in newspapers and broadsheet advertisements of wondrous things, advances in medical science that could obscure my divine radiance from the mortals which surrounded myself. It was these items I first sought and, after some amount of care, obtained unscrupulously. Theft, as base and as low as it was necessary to discover what had happened to my Annabelle, and to finally live the life that had been spared for me. My nightly sojourns had informed me further of other advances in society and in the technology which sustained me, and this equally stolen information on subjects now called biorobotics was to prove invaluable to me in the near future. First, though, was the small matter of finding my sister. I spent the better part of an evening dowing myself in the artificial flesh they used for burn victims and bearers of prostheses. Through my cracked mirrors I seemed the spitting image of a fine young maiden, so pleased with my appearance that I attired myself handsomely, an act which I had not done since before my sister had left, and set out in daylight to seek my sister's whereabouts. I was not so mad as to think that she had survived as long as I, without some sort of intervention. Even had the doctor tried to replicate his process with another, he would need to reconstitute his research from the ground up. In his haste to show the good doctor the door, my father had unwittingly prevented the man from gathering his notes and papers. These then found their way into the library, presumably placed there by a maid or some such, and it was there that I learned of the process done to me and how irreplaceable I was. I existed as a wholly unique creature head to toe, so even if she had sought out this doctor and begged him for immortality, he could not grant it. Why then was I compelled so to seek her out? What animus gave me direction and purpose? Perhaps the words of the poet who stated that hope is a temporary insanity turned out to be true after all. Perhaps it was a way of confronting reality and facing mine own fears of love and loss. Or perhaps it was a genuine belief in Providence spilling its bounties down upon my person. I suppose the reason matters little, for how the results were the same regardless. It was on my 15th day trip into this strange new world, with its demonic overabundance of horseless carriages and moving pictures and hand-held seeing stones, that my aimless seeking bore fruit. I saw her. I saw my Annabelle, in the flesh, exactly as I remembered her. You must think me mad. Yes, you must, certainly so, for I thought myself mad when I recognized her on the street that day. Completely, irredeemably, entirely mad. It had been decades. Entire technologies and fashion had risen and fallen in the time between when she left and when I sought her out, but I could not doubt the evidence of my eyes. Her attire was new, true, but the rest? It was her. Her hair in the fashion she preferred, cascading down her back, her laugh like the babbling of a beautiful robin nestled in the eaves, just as it was before. Her soft, supple skin so gently and fair. Even her mannerisms were the same. What else could she be? An apparition or spirit of some kind, sent to torment me? Why then did she interact with the world like a living creature? A reincarnation, perhaps? Possibly, but unlikely, given that her visage was the exact same as the one that had existed prior. Being born again always changes you, even if you are a higher being such as myself. Could it be her? Could she too have persevered across all this time? I racked my cortex for any possible argument against this. No, she died. She cannot have possibly lived. This is a different being, but all came up devastatingly short. She was different. Why was she the exact same? The possibility of that, the mere chances were astronomical. Further, it cannot be my recollection that was flawed. It was like myself, flawless. No, not flawed, not in the slightest. Improbable to such an extreme extent that any discussion regarding said possibility would be more productive being dismissed entirely out of hand. Yes, it was concluded, however mad it may seem, it was her. All logical and deductive processes proved it. Madness backed by logic is no madness at all. Though it was merely a few heartbeats span that this entire deductive process overcame me. It was enough time for people to pass me by. Most cruel of all, the face which I loved began to shrink into the crowd. My purpose thus renewed, I took it upon myself to follow her. My Annabelle was so easy to observe. In her fanciful little modern apartment, scarcely any security at all. Her papers and belongings whispered the complete tale of the nature of her current existence. She went by a different name, had photos of a different family, had lived a different life. Amnesia? Perhaps the organic brain forgets when it reaches a certain age. Again, or the faintest flicker of a second, doubt gripped me and held me fast. Through what process could she have been preserved when all other things decay? Is it possible that some divine messenger had preserved her for my benefit? Could the ineffable qualities which made me the perfect candidate, the chosen of all for the surgery, could they have preserved my Annabelle? Suddenly, the truth unfolded itself before my own eyes, and the potency of the revelation drove me nearly into a laughing fit. There in the darkened room where Annabelle made her respite, it was as though a thunderbolt from the Olympian god himself had struck me. It was, at its core, all so devastatingly simple. Why had it not occurred to me in my flawless deduction before that very moment? Of course she would not be dead. She's too pure for such mundanities as death. She was not corrupted as I was. Like Mother Mary herself, she would sooner be borne aloft on a chariot to heaven than rot in the earth. Everything decays, but her. Not her. Never her. It was during this nocturnal prowling I made a devastatingly unpleasant discovery. In a pile of documents on whatever cardboard and tin facsimile passes or table in this era, there was a letter from a doctor. Annabelle, now apparently being referred to as Sarah for some bizarre reason, was tested, retested, and diagnosed with a terribly rare wasting disease. The same one I had become afflicted with when she was but a small child. The prognosis was grim, or so it seemed. It was an advanced stage, and the hospital urged that treatment could have a chance. The piteous clinging and grasping of mere mortals. There was only one cure, one way that she could stay with me and, like myself, endure forever. I did not know this way. I alone had it, and had kept it secret and safe, and the providence! This was why she had been saved. This was why the papers had been left. This was to be my purpose. I was to prepare her for the next stage of her life, so that she may sit astride the heavens as she belongs. She was never supposed to decay, and my divine prowess would ensure that she never shall. It is oft said amongst the faithful and devout of Christendom that every event that happens is according to some cosmic mandate and corresponding to a grand divine plan. Until this moment I had truly not believed so, but this proved that I had indeed gained the spark of divinity long past. What further proof of such does one need? Here I was, ageless, incorruptible, no longer needing food or water, stronger than even the horses that once pulled our grand carriages to and fro. I am aware of how mad it must seem, but what other explanation can satisfy? The great philosophers of the Mohammedans and of the Indies and of Europe all agreed with my suppositions. That which cannot die and can beget life itself must itself be a god. Even gods must get lonely, it appeared, and despite the twin spark of divinity that dwelled inside her, I began to grow doubtful that she could persevere another century without my intervention. I looked again at my Annabel, sleeping as she was in the dark of her home upon which I had intruded. Her frame was more light than I had recalled, her eyes more sunken, her cheeks more sallow. Ah, what a fool I was to not notice in the light of day. It was so clear now. She was dying. Her feeble organic body had been stressed to its limit, and I, holy and spectacular, was the only thing that could save her for eternity. Ah, how she protested my touch. She claimed to recall me not. Never could have wept I might have at hearing the abuse and indignities she screamed at my person. It was like she had forgotten our life together entirely. Still, this discouraged me only a little, but not enough to sway me from my path, and despite her repeated attempts to break free, I remained the physically stronger of us two. I, cleverly, deduced that in her confusion and addled state, she may attempt escape, so, to circumvent this, while I obtained all necessary tools and materials, she was temporarily locked within the cellar. It was for her own benefit, truly. I could not bear to see her disappear again, and she had not the time needed for me to locate her, a diamond in a cart full of hay yet again. In the dark weeks intervening her return to our home and the awaited day I endeavored to bring her food and drink. She refused at first. She had even attacked me once. She struck my face with a blow so fierce it reverberated off of the cool masonry of the cellar like a thunderclap. In lieu of breaking free, the only thing broken were the bones of her hand. She learned not to strike me again. Finally, after a seemingly boundless creativity for insults had run dry, her voice had run hoarse, and her frame had lightened yet more, she deigned to eat and sustain herself. This gladdened my heart, and preparations for ascension continued forthwith. After an indeterminate amount of time, though, my perfect recollection places it within the space of 3 months, all was ready. The drawing-room had been carefully and expertly converted by my own hands, and tools had been procured. I also took the opportunity, given the advances in technology, to direct my own genius into improving the designs left by my savior and predecessor, and had thus acquired parts of various mixed components that would leave my sister as sleek and as lithe and as picturesque as she had ever been. Polymer and aluminium in place of porcelain and copper would make her much lighter on her feet than even myself. My darling little sister deserved only the greatest that creation could offer, and by my own great effort she would get exactly that which she deserved. With care, my Annabel was slipped a drug in her food to endure her to rest. Carefully, her slumbering body was taken up from its temporary imprisonment. Carefully was it laid upon the table in the chamber of salvation. Carefully were leathered straps affixed and measurements taken. Carefully were vials arranged, notes conferred, and tools laid out. Carefully did I caress her drowsy cheek and urge calm. Carefully did I direct the incisions of her flesh and the flensing of the knives. Oh, so carefully did I ignore the screaming and pleading of her mind on the threshold of understanding that no worthwhile metamorphosis is accomplished without great anguish. Like the Christ at Gethsemane, I knew that suffering was to be endured for salvation, and Like the Christ at Golgotha, I endured it anyway. Slowly, over many hours, the flesh work progressed, and the screams became mere background noise in the face of absolute force. The sun had risen and set again by the time that I had completed my work and beget another goddess into this world of insects. With tenderness I disposed of the useless oval of a slowly decaying prison and cleaned the room. It took my sister some time after the procedure to regain her bearings and pull the scattered pieces of her mind and soul back into a cohesive enough whole to perceive the world around her. When she asked what had happened in her new voice, I informed her she had been saved. She pressed the questioning, and I, beloved sister that I am, answered all in truth. She was reminded of who I was, who she was, what had happened and why. After a long and seemingly eternal pause, she asked to be let free to see a new visage, and naturally I obliged her. The blindings were undone. Like a bat in daylight, she darted towards the nearby cracked mirror, and there beholding her own immortal form, gleaming and shiny and new, destined to outlast even the foundations of the earth, she screamed louder and longer than she had before. She did not pause to take breath, for she no longer needed to breathe, and though she clawed at her own face, she could not mar its metallic shell. I allowed her this time of distress, of course. I am not a monster, and she needed time to get used to her own freshly superior status. It is understandable that it shall take time for her to recognize this and to return my love with adoration and gratitude of her own. She will. Further, she will come to acknowledge that this is all for her the best. This I know in the deepest recesses of my mind. We have, after all eternity together.